Hello everyone, and welcome to the String Functions and Operators lecture. In this lecture, we're going to learn where you can find various string functions available in PostgreSQL, and then we're going to see some basic examples. This is going to be almost like a sister lecture to the mathematical functions. There's a ton of string functions and operators in PostgreSQL, as well as just basic SQL, so it won't make sense to go through all of them, but what I want you to get out of this lecture is just know that they're available to you and see some basic examples of them. So, like I mentioned, SQL comes with a lot of string operators already built in, and you can explore all of them in the documentation at this link, or you can just basically Google search PostgreSQL plus string functions, and it will take you to this link as the first hit. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump to the documentation, explore it, and then see some basic examples. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the documentation now. Okay, so here we are at the documentation. It's under string functions and operators. And basically here, just like the mathematical functions section, you'll have a list of functions, the type of data it returns, either text or integer, a description of what it does, and then an example of it. So just by coincidence, my name is actually here in some of the examples. And you can check out the examples yourself. So some of these really useful ones can be just like concatenating strings together, meaning putting them together, such as like PostgreSQL. That's just these two bars here. And there's a ton of functions here for you to check out, as well as some other string functions for putting them in different Unicode, in case you're familiar with that at all. But you can go ahead and check all of these out. We're going to go ahead and jump to pgadmin. As I scroll down here, you can see there's a huge list of them. So let's go over through some of the most basic ones and some of the most useful ones. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump to pgadmin and open up a SQL editor there. Alright everybody, so here I am at the SQL editor for pgadmin. The table we're going to be working with to see a couple of these string function examples is the customer table. So let's go ahead and select all columns from customer, then put semicolon. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And here's our data output. And we have 3 columns here where the specific data type is character. So that means it's strings that we can play around with as far as these string functions. So we have first name, last name, and email. Let's go ahead and play around with first name and last name first. One of the most basic functions or string operators you can use is concatenation, meaning kind of sticking stuff together. So let's go ahead and try that out. I can take one column, in this case I'll say first name, and concatenate it, basically sticking it together with the last name. And the way I do that is by using these two vertical bars. So I say select first name, these two vertical bars. You can usually find them above your enter or return key. So shift and then that button there. Last name from customer. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like if I run that. And notice here we have the first name of the customer and the last name of the customer kind of squished together, meaning they've been concatenated together. In order to make this look a little nicer, let's go ahead and put a space in between these names and then change the name column. So a more useful example of what this would look like is if I took an empty string, so just a single quote, a space, and a single quote, and concatenated that in between first and last name. So I'm saying the first name column with concatenation of an empty string, another 2 vertical bars here, and then the last name column from customer. And then I'm going to use aliasing, which is just using that as statement, to name this column. We'll call this column full underscore name from, we'll say it comes from the customer. Let's go ahead and run this. And now we have this nice full name column with the full name of the customer, Jared Ellie, Mary Smith, etc. So this is kind of a real use case of when you may want to be using these sort of string operators in order to figure stuff out like that. So we have a full name here. Let's go ahead and mess around with one other string function, and that might be trying to figure out how many characters a name has. So if we take a look at the first name column, we have Jared, Mary, Patricia, Linda as those first 2 outputs. What we can do is use the function character length, which is char underscore length. So char underscore length, and pass in a column of characters, in this case first name. And if we run that, it'll return how many characters are in that specific row for that column. So another just basic string function we can do is like upper and lower. So I can say like upper first name, and what that will do is return everything uppercase. And you can do the same thing with lower, that'll return everything lowercase. Again, as I showed in the documentation, there's a ton of string operators and functions for you to explore. So if you ever find yourself needing to work with string functions and operators, or trying to use string functions, let's say like a regular expression, if that's something you're familiar with, basically trying to find patterns where just a simple like statement isn't enough for you, you can go ahead and check out the documentation. And if I go ahead and jump to it real quick, I actually have it open on a tab here. We have string functions and operators. If I zoom in a bit, for more advanced users of SQL and more advanced programmers in general, you may want to check out regular expressions in SQL. Granted, make sure you reference your specific SQL's engine's documentation in order to fully understand how to use it. But if we scroll down here, you'll notice you have some regular expressions. So that means basically you can pass in string columns and look for matches of certain words here, and it'll tell you when they pop up. You can also do replacements, etc. And as another quick note, there's actually a whole subsection of PostgreSQL's documentation to explore regular expressions a little further. So I encourage you to check this out in this specific documentation link if regular expressions is something you feel you're going to be using a lot. Now, again, I always recommend trying to use something like in order to use a regular expression operator as far as a pattern matching scheme, just because it's a lot simpler and easier to come back to when you're reading your code later on. But if you do need some more complicated tasks, SQL and specifically PostgreSQL can support that. Okay, so I hope you've gotten out of this lecture is just a general idea of what's possible with string functions and operators, and you know where the documentation is in case you want to reference anything later on for your own specific data sets, either at home or at work. Okay, thanks everyone, and I will see you at the next lecture.